There's the Calypso Band back at the hotel. This was our last night in Jamaica, and as you can see, they wrote in flowers on the table to come again. Michael testing the wine to see if it's okay. We were dancing. I think we were doing a bamboo dance here, and there was a native dance. They did the voodoo dance, and then they were doing the limbo, and they could go very, very low, as you can see on the picture. This was a show that they performed every night for us. It was just lovely. And these are the different people just dancing out on the floor. The natives invited everybody to participate with them. Then we went to a place called Count Motherless and the Ruins. And it was another reggae room. Mike was trying to find steel guitars or steel drums. There's Mike and I dancing. There was our room. They laid out the our pajamas and our nightgown every night. It was just lovely. And there's Jamaica from the air and Kingston Harbor. There's the southern coast of Cuba. There's Long Island where we were flying in. And there we were back at Kennedy Airport. May of 19. Mike was on. This was in the Cutty Sark. This was in May of 1965. These were just the Cutty Sark, and Mike was on the Cutty Sark. After we were married again, September of 1967, we were at Pitt Stadium playing UCLA, and there was the Cathedral of Learning in Pittsburgh, and there's Pitt Stadium. This was in October of 1967 in our first apartment in Johnstown. John and Kathy McKay had come to visit from New Jersey, and Walt and Linda Brocious, who I worked with at Lee Hospital, and her husband. And there's John McKay. We had gone to a place called Herculini's in Gallitzin, Pennsylvania, where the food was just wonderful. As you can see, this was just the appetizer. And we had such a good time. They had just course after course after course. It's Linda and Walt. And John. There's Mike again. There's Linda with Michael at Herculini's. We had such a good time. The next day, we went to the Steeler Giant game in Pittsburgh, and there's John and Kathy and Mike. Then we went to the Wednesday before Thanksgiving of that year, 1967. We went to a party at the Hensels, and there's Kathy McKay and Cindy Dahlbeck. There's Vicky. And there we are at Uncle Joe and Aunt Loretta's house for Thanksgiving. There's Joe and Kenny, young Kenny. These were Joe and Loretta's children. There's Uncle Joe. And there's Aunt Peg. Aunt Peg was Grandpa Gagan's sister. And this was everybody at the table. There's Aunt Peg showing off her bloomers. She was a delightful lady. There's Grandma and Aunt Peg, and they were sisters-in-law. There's Loretta, Mike's aunt on his mother's side. And there's Joel and Mike. Joel is the oldest child. The Friday after the 1967 Thanksgiving, there was a Sheraton Hotel in New York where we had stayed for a honeymoon. Then we went to Grant's tomb. Then we went to see Grandma Fricky, and that was Grandma and Mike. And there's Grandma Fricky. And there's a picture of Aunt Gertrude, the back door of their home of Grandma and Gertrude's home in Brooklyn. There's New York City at night. I love taking those pictures. There's John and Kathy McKay in New Jersey. There's John and Mike. John and Kathy and Mike, we just gone to visit them. They were very good friends of Mike's. And there was the Holiday Inn where we had our reception. This is December the 16th, 1967. There's Michael. This was our first Christmas tree in Lulay Place, on our nativity scene. Michael had got me those flowers for my birthday on December the 16th. There was our Christmas tree. And there's my Uncle Charles, who is my father's brother, and his wife Roseanne, and Mike. And there I am with them. And here I am with Becky Grazier. I was instrumental in getting that child for the Graziers to adopt. And there's their son Jerry and Becky. This is December the 21st of 1967. There's Betsy and Aaron and Mike and Dad, Mike's dad, and Herb Galooly. There's Mike's father, Jim Naughton. There's Mike and his father. And Dennis and his father. We were all at Dennis's home. December the 24th, we went to Rockefeller Center. And Saks Fifth Avenue. There was Mike in front of the tree at Rockefeller Center. We used to always make it a point to go to New York at Christmas time. There's Grandma Fricky. Mike looks like he's had just about all the Christmas he can take. And there's Aunt Gertrude. She always had everything decorated nicely. And there's Grandma. And this was Christmas Eve when we were opening presents. This is Grandma and Mike. And she was opening her Christmas presents. And there I am opening my Christmas present. As I remember, Aunt Gertrude had gotten us a blanket. I hope there's Grandma looking at my getting a shower wrap. that he decided to try on. Oh, and there I am. I had gotten a new outfit. And there was Grandma again. And there's where Grandma and Aunt Gertrude lived at 409 Linden Boulevard in Brooklyn. And this was Christmas Day. We went up to see Betsy and Dennis and Aaron. And that's Barbara Connell. That's Betsy's sister. And Michael had just gotten his new golf clubs that I got him for his Christmas. He seems really pleased with them. And there we are at Dennis's home. This was our first Christmas together. And Dennis and Mike. Betsy expecting Liz. And Dennis and Mike trying out the golf clubs. There's Dennis, Betsy, Aaron, and Mrs. Conlon. Ann Conlon, that was Betsy's mom. And Aaron, who had the curliest hair. And she was such a nice little girl. And we had gotten Erin her first tricycle. So Uncle Mike was showing her how. And we got her a stuffed animal. And we were looking at how that animal was. I guess I was really tired. There's Dennis and Mike enjoying Christmas Day. Just sitting around, reminiscing, talking about when they were young. They seemed to be having a good time. They were very, very close to one another. Oh, and there's a picture of Dennis and Betsy's home in Sparta, New Jersey. We had an ice storm that day, as I remember. There's Mike and I back in Johnstown in January of '67 in our townhouse. And we were just kind of resting and relaxing. We were getting ready to go out with Walt and Linda to Shangri-La restaurant. There's Mike going upstairs to get organized. Ever reading. This was on March the 17th, 1968. This was at Liz's christening. There's Mike and Mr. Connell, Betsy's father. And there's Liz and Mrs. Connell. And Gertrude and the baby. Liz was beautiful. There are Mike and I. We don't have any babies yet. And there's Grandma Gagan and Betsy and Liz and Aunt Peg and Mrs. Conlon. Oh, there's Dennis and Aunt Peg and Erin looking at her Easter bunny. And there's Betsy and Dennis. There's June of 1968. We were at Kennedy Airport to meet Grandma Naughton as she came home. And there's Grandma and Aaron. And Uncle Mike's behind there. And that was Aaron and Grandma and Dennis. Oh, here we are. All of us went to Lake Tomahawk. Aaron and Liz and Betsy and Dennis and Mike and I and Grandma Naughton. This is Mom with her boys. And there's Aaron. Oh, there's Aaron and Betsy. And they're just swinging. And June the 19th, 1968, we went to a shower at Linda's. Linda Brocious was expecting her first child, Christy. And these were the pictures that were taken at Linda's shower, baby shower. I think I did that watermelon where I shaped it all out. There's Mike and his mom in Johnstown. She'd come to see our new apartment. This was her birthday dinner, June the 22nd, 1968. Her birthday was the 23rd, but we went out on the 22nd. And this is Linda, still expecting her baby. And this is Walt, her husband. And this is Linda, Mike, me, and Grandma Naughton. And this is Mike and I and his mom, Mary. And this was Mary at our home in Johnstown. And this is September of 1968. And this is Fort McHenry in Baltimore, Maryland. This was the Baltimore Harbor. This was Mike at the cannon. And that's the flag. This is where Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. And there I am at the sign for the National Monument and Historic Shrine at Fort McHenry. This is a historic mansion in that area. And there's my father, Jack Klein, at the Masonic home outside of Baltimore. My mother and dad, Ruth and Jack Klein. And then this is December the 14th, 1968. This is my mom and Michael. And my father, Jack. And this was in Eppensburg at my mom and dad's home on 210 East Horner Street. This is me and David and my mother and dad. And there we are with Michael. It's just close to my birthday. There we are at Grandma Gagan's home at Christmas 1968. And she was opening her Christmas presents. And there's Mary Naughton, Mike's mom. And there I am with some goodie. Oh, and there's Mike and his mom. And here we are in Sparta, New Jersey again. This is Dennis Aaron and his mom. Ah, and that's Dennis and Betsy had had a caricature done of Dennis, which is very much a likeness of him. And there's Aaron and Betsy and Liz and Den, all ready for Christmas, enjoying every bit of it. So many toys. Ah, there's Uncle Mike and Aaron. She looks very interested in that doll. There's Erin, the Christmas tree with one of her goodies. And this is Mike and his mom. And this is Christmas of 1968 in Cockeysville, Maryland, with my mother and my father, Jack and Ruth Klein. There's my brother David. There's my father. The cabinet behind my father was my grandmother's. And this is my father and his gift, Mike and the tree. This is when in our apartment in Cockeysville. This was a friend that lived next door. Her name was Kit. And my father and Mike. And there's my mom. She really looked happy. And there's my dad and David. They're playing gin. Dad's reading the paper. Mike's watching a ball game. They're all just reading. And there's Mother and Dad and David. I think they're getting ready to leave and go back to Ebensburg. There's our Christmas tree. This is New Year's Day, 1969. Mike was really sick with a cold. This is St. Patrick's Day in Baltimore, Maryland. Mike with all his badges on to indicate that it's St. Patrick's Day. There he is with his hat on again. And these pictures show the parades that we went to in Baltimore. All the Irish colleens. Everybody seemed to be having a really good time. Baltimore's a very Irish town. And there's the Gahagan School of Dancing. No relation, but interesting that we should see it. And there's my grandmother Klein, Jenny, and we're out at the cemetery to see my grandfather's grave. And there's the Birds and the Boston Red Sox opening day at Memorial Stadium in Baltimore. And there's Memorial Stadium. Gone now. There I am, pregnant with Laura. And there's May of 1969. There's Mike in Washington. And there's the Washington Monument. And this picture's taken from the Jefferson Memorial, where you can see the Washington Monument. And there I am. As I remember, we walked to the top of the Washington Monument when I was pregnant with Laura, and that was May of '69, as I said. And these were all taken in Washington. It was a beautiful city, and this is one of Mike's favorite uh, statues is the Jefferson Memorial. At this time, we had moved to Cockeysville, Maryland, and this was we were outside our apartment in Cockeysville. And this was from the Washington Monument in June of 1969. Saw the Washington Monument and the to the Jefferson Memorial. This is when I was up on top there. I walked the entire span of steps, and this was from the Washington Monument to the Lincoln Memorial. And then the next one is the Washington Monument to the White House. There I am. Very large. Uh, there's the Washington Monument from the Lincoln Memorial. And there's Mike. There's the Lincoln Memorial. This is a picture taken from the Custis Lee Mansion. And there's the Custis Lee Mansion. There was John F. Kennedy's grave, the Marine Memorial, the Iwo Jima, and there was the Church of the Presidents. June 6th, 1969 was a surprise baby shower for me. I should have known something was going on that day because Michael took me window shopping. He never does that. Never, never. But it was a lovely surprise, and I got some lovely things. There was the baby shower table. All the pretty things on the table. And there's Mary Naughton. She was having her hair frosted. I was frosting her hair for her. And there I am in Cockeysville, waiting for that baby to come. It was Mike and his mom. And we were preparing for the baby. Make sure everything was okay. There was Laura, July the 16th, 1969, getting ready to go home. There she is. There's Laura and her granddaddy, my father, Jack. Because Mike had a convention in the Caribbean and he had to go to that. So my father came and took me home from the hospital. Grandpa was really impressed. And there's Laura. And there was Laura. Laura was the first grandchild on this side of the family. So she was very, very special. She was a good baby. She just kind of slept most of the time. Slept and ate. This was her first feeding at home. And there are flowers that were received when Laura was born. It was nice to have them all. There's Mike and Grandpa and Laura. Mike wasn't too sure exactly how to hold her, but he did his best. There she is, Sleeping Beauty. Laura and her daddy. There's Grandma holding Laura for the very first time. And she was making sure that she was nice and warm, doing things grandmas do. Grandma gave her her first feeding from Grandma. Look at her crossed feet down there. She seemed very relaxed. Certainly more relaxed than I was. Oh, there's Laura's bare bottom. This was right after she had had a bath. Grandma had taken very good care of her. There was Mike with Laura, and Laura with her mom. There's Laura. With her pacifier. There's Grandma Naughton and Laura. Grandma decided she didn't have enough to eat, so she should have some cereal. So she had some cereal. And we all tried feeding it to her. She seemed to like it. Except when Dad did it. He didn't seem to have the right touch at that point. This was on August the 3rd. This was Laura's first car ride since coming home from the hospital. She seemed to like it. This was after her first car ride. Aww. Resting on Dad's shoulder. There she is, looking at one of her stuffed animals. She's just wondering who's snapping all those pictures all the time. There's Laura with Ted Williams. Dad was really pleased with that. Thought Laura should have a picture there. There's Great Grandma Wills with Laura. This is my mother's mother. And there's Great Grandma Wills and Grandma Klein and Laura. Nice pictures. This was the first great grandchild. This was on my grandmother's porch in South Fork, Pennsylvania. Laura was a swinger even then. There's Laura and her mom. This is August the 24th, 1969. It's a country club in Ebensburg, and David out on the course, and Laura with her grandmother out at the club. As I said, Laura loved to swing. There's Laura and Grandma. They were really worn out. It looks like they're getting ready to take a ride somewhere. Laura liked going to Ebensburg. Somebody was always paying attention to her and taking care of her. She looks a little tired there. She's very, very tired. Everybody looks very tired at this point. And there's my mom, Wills, and Laura. Oh, there's my mom giving Laura her bath. This is a friend of Grandma Klein's, Louise Wise. There's another friend of Grandma Klein's, Helen Henselman. September the 19th, 1969, there's Grandma and Mike and Laura. There's Grandma and Laura. They're getting ready to go home to Ebensburg. There's Grandpa and Grandma and Laura. There's Laura and her daddy. September the 30th, 1969. This is the first time Grandma Fricky has seen Laura. Grandma loves to see Laura. I think she's a very special little girl. There she is holding Laura. And Laura looks very content being held by Grandma. Apparently Grandma knows what she's doing. This was on Grandma's front porch. And this was in between her dining room and her living room. There's Aunt Gertrude and Grandma and Laura and her daddy. It's Grandma and Gertrude and Laura and her daddy. Oh, they're all having such a good time with her. Oh, how happy they seem to be to see her. Laura didn't cry one time. She was really good.